2 a.m., an unannounced flight lifted off from California in complete silence. No schedule, no press notice, no entourage. Just one passenger who hadn't slept in 36 hours and wouldn't sleep for much longer. Prince Harry wasn't traveling for a royal engagement or a carefully planned family visit. He was running straight toward the most dangerous moment of his personal life. The call didn't come from Sarah Ferguson herself. It came from a palace intermediary, instructed to deliver a message that couldn't be ignored. Sarah has materials, letters, recordings, physical evidence linking Meghan to Prince Andrew's yacht years. And unless Harry came to London and faced it head-on, all of it was going public. This wasn't gossip or tabloid noise. These were items that could be authenticated, challenged, and weaponized. Alone in the dark cabin, Harry understood the cruelty of the irony. The man who walked away from the monarchy to protect his wife was being pulled back by secrets he never knew existed. Whatever Sarah was holding didn't just threaten embarrassment. It threatened the marriage he had defended, the identity he had built, and the story he had told the world. As the plane began its descent toward Heathrow, one truth became unavoidable. This emergency flight wasn't the crisis. It was the warning. What waited in London would make everything up to this moment feel easy by comparison. For years, Prince Harry believed he knew exactly who he was in this story. He was the royal who broke ranks when others stayed quiet. The one who publicly condemned Prince Andrew while the institution hesitated. The prince who walked away from titles, tradition, and family because he believed protecting Meghan mattered more than preserving the crown. That choice wasn't impulsive. It became his identity. And now, that identity was cracking. Because the man who once fled the royal system to save his wife was being dragged back into it by the possibility that she might not have told him everything. The irony was brutal. Harry had spent years accusing the palace of secrecy and manipulation, only to discover that the most dangerous silence might have existed much closer to home. The woman he defended against scrutiny may have been shielding parts of her own history. And the uncle he condemned as a symbol of everything wrong with the monarchy might not be the only figure in this story whose actions deserved hard questions. This wasn't a clean battle anymore. There were no clear heroes or villains, only a narrowing corridor of uncomfortable truths. If Harry continued to stand by the narrative he had built his life around, he would be choosing belief over evidence. But if he allowed himself to question it, even for a moment, he would have to confront something far more devastating than betrayal. He would have to accept that his role may never have been that of a rescuer at all. That he wasn't the beginning of this story, but its final chapter. Written not in malice, but in trust, placed in a version of reality that may have never been whole. And once that realization takes hold, there's no way back. For years, Sarah Ferguson said nothing. She watched Meghan rise from relative obscurity into global influence. She watched Harry defend his wife with unwavering loyalty. And she watched the palace do what it had always done best: contain, redirect, and quietly bury stories that threatened the institution. Sarah stayed silent through all of it. Not because she didn't know, but because she was waiting. Something changed in late 2025. Prince Andrew's legal troubles were no longer background noise. They were closing in. Meghan continued to profit from a narrative of victimhood that left no room for inconvenient history. And Harry, the one royal who had treated Sarah with genuine kindness long after her fall from favor, was still fighting battles he didn't fully understand. To Sarah, it began to look less like loyalty and more like manipulation. And that, more than resentment or revenge, became the turning point. So Sarah chose her moment carefully. Not a courtroom, not a press release, a podcast. Piers Morgan's platform offered the perfect balance: credible enough to be taken seriously, volatile enough to detonate instantly. And Sarah didn't unload accusations or tell a long story. She delivered a single sentence. Meghan Markle was Prince Andrew's first client. That word, client, was the weapon. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't accidental. In the world Sarah inhabited, it carried implications of transaction, arrangement, and intent. It suggested planning rather than coincidence, structure rather than romance. And by choosing that word, Sarah forced everyone listening to reconsider the story they thought they knew. She didn't explain further. She didn't have to. Because once that phrase entered the public record, the silence she'd kept for years suddenly felt far more dangerous than anything she'd just said. At this point, the story crossed a line it could not step back from. What had once lived in whispers and second-hand accounts began to harden into something far more dangerous. This was no longer about recollection or interpretation. It was about documentation. The first pieces were letters, handwritten, personal. Not formal notes or polite exchanges, but messages filled with private references, crew members mentioned by name, cabins and decks described with familiarity, inside jokes that would mean nothing to an outsider. Details like these don't travel through rumor, they come from presence. But the most unsettling element wasn't what the letters said. It was when they were written. Some were dated alarmingly close to the period when Meghan was already known to be involved with Harry. Dates have weight. They anchor stories in time, and time is difficult to argue with. Then came the recordings. Not transcripts, not summaries, voices. Meghan's voice described as relaxed, unguarded, addressing Andrew by nickname in settings that felt unmistakably private. Audio doesn't rely on memory. It can be tested, authenticated, replayed. Once a voice is heard in a context it was never meant to explain, denial becomes fragile. Finally, the structure appeared. The driver's logbooks, official records kept as part of professional duty, later sworn under oath. Meghan's name didn't surface once or twice, but repeatedly, following the same special guest protocol. During the same period, she was publicly Harry's girlfriend. Patterns replace coincidence. Systems replace stories. Taken together, these weren't impressions or testimonies competing for belief. They were physical records. And once a story becomes a file, dated, logged, and preserved, it stops asking to be believed. It demands to be answered. Somewhere over the Atlantic, while the cabin lights were dimmed and the engines hummed steadily beneath him, Harry lost the ability to respond. He couldn't call. He couldn't clarify. He couldn't stop what was coming. The information arrived while he was trapped in the air, isolated inside a metal tube, forced to receive truths without the power to push back. That timing wasn't accidental. It made the impact unavoidable. The first rupture came with photographs dated 2009. Meghan and Andrew standing close, relaxed, unmistakably familiar. The metadata was clean. The year was not. This was 3 years before Harry had ever met Meghan. On its own uncomfortable, but survivable. Then the timeline kept moving. Messages followed, each one darker than the last, suggesting the relationship hadn't ended with the past. It had continued. Quietly. Persistently. Overlapping with the period when Meghan and Harry were already serious. And then came the line that collapsed everything. A message from someone Harry trusted, stripped of emotion and heavy with fact. She was still visiting Andrew's properties 6 months before your engagement. 6 months. Not a lifetime ago. Not before things were real. But during the moment Harry was already committing his future, already defending her publicly, already burning bridges for a story he believed was honest. That was the point of no return. This was no longer about youthful mistakes or buried history. The timeline didn't just suggest a complicated past, it pointed to deception unfolding in the present. And once dates begin to overlap, explanations disappear. What remains isn't confusion. It's a reckoning. Harry arrived at Royal Lodge alone. No advisors, no security buffer. Just a man walking into a room he had avoided for years, carrying questions he was no longer sure he wanted answered. Andrew was nowhere to be seen. His absence spoke louder than any denial could have. This was not a family discussion. It was a reckoning. Sarah didn't dramatize the moment. She didn't need to. She placed the materials in front of Harry and let them speak for themselves. Letters first, then the recordings, then the driver's logbooks. No accusations. No raised voice. Just documents, played and read in silence. Harry didn't interrupt. He listened. He read. And with each page, the space for doubt narrowed. The lack of theatrics made the truth heavier, not lighter. Nothing here felt exaggerated. That was the most unsettling part. When Sarah finally spoke, her words were precise and devastating. Andrew won't protect you. The palace won't tell you the truth. And Meghan never intended for you to know. It wasn't said with anger, it was said as fact. That was the moment Harry understood the trap. Accept the evidence and lose the marriage and identity he had built his life around. Reject it and live forever with the knowledge that his denial might be a lie. There was no choice that didn't destroy something. And once the truth is placed in front of you, you don't get to pretend you never saw it. The moment the story escaped closed doors, it took on a life of its own. What had unfolded in private was now being processed in public, at scale and at speed. As Harry's presence in London became visible, the narrative was no longer controlled by individuals. It belonged to the media ecosystem. In the UK, coverage hardened quickly. British outlets treated the allegations less like a shock and more like an explanation, answers to questions that had lingered for years without resolution. Across the Atlantic, the tone shifted. American media hesitated, caught between emerging documentation and a long-standing narrative that framed Meghan as a victim of institutional hostility. Reports were careful, qualified, and cautious, covering the claims without fully endorsing them. Online, restraint vanished. Social platforms turned into live investigation rooms. Users stitched timelines together, resurfaced old photographs, replayed interviews, and dissected Meghan's past statements line by line. What had once been dismissed as coincidence began to look patterned when viewed collectively. The crowd didn't need consensus. Momentum was enough. Then came the denial. Brief, legalistic, vague. It rejected characterization without confronting specifics. And that omission became the headline. What wasn't denied drew more attention than what was. In the end, the response didn't slow the story, it accelerated it. Because in a media storm like this, silence isn't neutral, it's combustible. This was where the story stopped behaving like a scandal and started behaving like a record. Sarah Ferguson's book was not framed as another emotional royal tell-all destined to flare and fade. It was designed with intention, structured like a case file. Footnoted, cross-referenced, built to withstand challenge rather than generate sympathy. And that was precisely what made it dangerous. The book does not accuse Meghan of criminal wrongdoing. It doesn't need to. Instead, it places her presence carefully within the broader context of Andrew's Epstein-era world. Dates, locations, proximity, and patterns laid out without commentary. The absence of emotion is deliberate. What remains now is not a verdict, not a conclusion, but a conversation unfolding in real time. All details discussed are based on public commentary and ongoing media discussion, not confirmed facts. As with any complex public story, the truth may only become clear over time, and it is up to viewers to examine multiple perspectives and decide what they believe.